welcome to the History of the Batman with Londyn, brought to you by Meltdown Comics and Collectibles in Hollywood, California. This is where we relive the defining moments of one of the most iconic figures in comic art and literature, the Batman. My name is Adam Silverstein, and as always, I am joined by Londyn. History of the Batman with Londyn is produced and engineered by Mason Booker. Londyn, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm great. Yeah, it's a wonderful Wednesday, Comic Book Wednesday, being recorded another day. But, yeah, we've got a very special guest today, don't we?
Yes, we do.
So we'd like all our Gothamites to give a warm welcome to Dr. Andrea Letamendi.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hello, Gotham girls and boys.
There you go. So, Drea, because I've already feel close enough that I can say that, and you don't. It's okay that I don't call you doctor?
It's totally fine.
Okay. So, you are a host, among many things, but you are a host of a podcast dedicated to the observation and clinical analysis of the characters in Batman the Animated Series.
Yes.
That is very specific.
It is so specific. It is a podcast all about one show, Batman the Animated Series, and all about one topic, psychological science. So my job as the co-host is to lift out the psychology that's in each episode of the classic, the wonderful, the amazing, I would say the best presentation of Batman. And basically analyze the characters, the stories, the relationships, and do my best to talk about theory, research, clinical analysis, mental health illness, treatments, anything that falls under psychological science. I'll do my best to kind of bring that out of the episode and to really talk about it using the world of Batman as my medium.
Wow. That's crazy.
That is, but
It
that's
is crazy.
Awesome. And there's so much love behind the animated series. It has a huge fan base, so I'm sure people who come across your show, I'm sure they love it and they get to learn something, which is what we're all about on History of the Batman, is talking about Batman and everyone learning more about this character. And we talked about it before the show, but you can dive into Batman on so many levels. and I've listened to many of the shows on the Arkham Session, which I do love, and I definitely recommend it. And you get into some really deep stuff with this character, and I think that's a good thing about Batman, is even though he's a comic book character, you can relate to him on your own personal level.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that with the animated series at the surface level, sometimes people will, find it to be superficial or find it to be just kind of like a kid's show.
Right.
So it's really, actually, I'm always surprised at just how deep it goes and how many layers there are and how much science and psychology is in that show. I credit all of those writers, and even anything to the music, to the animation, to the work that really went into that show to bring these really rich characters to life.
So a few things before we get started. I'd like to lay a little foundation here. So first of all, you're a doctor. How is this possible? Tell me your qualifications, because we're about to talk to some Gothamites here, and they might be like, okay, you are who? You're just talking about the psychology. Show me your qualifications.
That actually, I'm really glad that you bring that up, because there are lots of reasons why folks who don't have licenses or degrees or credentials would talk about comics and would talk about these themes. So I appreciate that question. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I'm licensed in the state of California, where we reside.
We do.
Yes.
And my training is from I'm going to try to give you the short version because we could be here for a long time. I've been in school longer than I've been doing anything else. So I will say this. I got my PhD in clinical psychology from UCSD. I did my internship at the West Los Angeles VA Hospital, worked a lot with veterans and soldiers. And that is where I drew upon my experience as a comic book reader and fan, and especially drew upon my experience, my relationship with Batman and Batman characters. And thereafter, I had various research roles, and now I'm the director of clinical training at a children's mental health agency by day. And by night, I do fun podcasts with you guys and the Arkham Sessions, and I write occasionally for some websites. Comics Alliance was a site I used to write for. I've written for The Guardian. I've appeared on various programs. So
had a TED Talk?
I did have it. I will say that if anyone wants to really know the story of how Batman brought me to my career for real, like real talk, they can watch my TED Talk. It's the psychology of superheroes, and it is my personal story about sort of hiding from this fandom of ours and trying to be secretive about it, because as I grew older, I realized that, I don't know, maybe people wouldn't take me seriously. Maybe I would never get my degree. Would I get a job? All these sorts of questions that I had. And so I won't give the ending away. Obviously, I have a career, but the TED Talk goes through some of those anxieties and worries and what's called imposter syndrome. And specifically, I point to Batman as being the golden thread that takes me through my career. So if folks want to learn more about that, it's online on YouTube.
Wow.
I want to learn about that now.
Yeah. Can we pause the podcast and just watch it together? And then
well, I'm very proud of, and I think this is still true, but I believe it's the only TED Talk with a Batman costume in it, a Batman in the actual TED Talk. So look for that.
That's awesome. And then real quick, we'll obviously ask you at the end, but the Arkham Sessions, where can people find that? Where is that available?
The best way to find it is on my website, underthemaskonline.com, and it's also hosted by Fanboy Comics, so folks can find it there as well.
Nice. Well, thanks for coming today. I know I'm excited about it, but I know Londyn is especially excited because you two have a major connection in that you both love the animated series.
Yes, the animated series is my personal favorite as well. And like I said to you earlier, I first started watching the 66 show, but then I discovered the animated series. And for me, it was the episode Bane. And that was the episode that made me kind of get into comics because I wanted to learn more about Bane because I thought he was amazing.
Wow.
And so my first book was reading Batman Nightfall. And I read 497, The Broken Bat, and that kind of jumpstart my love for comic book art and reading comics, and I've been doing it ever since. And I studied comic book art in college, and yeah, I've loved it. And yeah, the animated series is great, and like you said, a lot of people will take it more like superficial because it's animation, and people don't think you can get that deep with characters in a cartoon. But the animated series, like I'm sure you've talked about a lot of times, it was ahead of its time in a sense, and that's one of the reasons why its nostalgia has just stayed with so many people, and we don't see exactly that type of cartoon anymore, or at least right now, and people want that back. And although I'm all for change and different interpretations and looking at Batman in all different styles and lights, the animated series definitely brought a lot of now signature characters back from obscurity and really made them popular for all ages, it seems like. So yes, I love the animated series. So I was really excited to start listening to your podcast and know that you love it too. Out of all of the shows and comics and movies, what drew you to the animated series that you wanted to focus on that for the show and not another form?
For the Arkham Sessions
Yes, for the Arkham
podcast?
Sessions. Yes.
It mainly came out of my incessant chatter and discussion about Batman in the animated series and psychology related to it. So the podcast really became sort of like an idea that instead of just talking about this so much, why not just, do that in front of a microphone and invite other people to join you in this conversation, since clearly I had a passion for it and I was talking about it so much. But in particular, I was asked to be on this documentary called Necessary Evil, Supervillains of DC Comics,
Yes.
I think is the full title. Necessary Evil, Supervillains of DC Comics, which Warner Brothers released, I believe, in 2014. And so when I was brought in for the interview, we recorded a couple of hours just talking about all sorts of characters and villains. And when the film came out, my current co-host turned to me and said, like, all of your comments that ended up in this documentary are all about the animated series. Like, when they talk about the animated series, you show up. And that was the most fun I ever had. Scott Snyder's in that, Paul Dini's in that, Jim Lee's in that, like all these amazing Batman artists and creators and writers are in that. So it really, after that was released, it really kind of sparked this idea, like, let's just keep talking about the animated series.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah. So was there other Batman incarnations that you were attracted to, or, because you picked that one, right?
Yes.
But is there other ones that you like or that you can delve into, or you pretty much restricted yourself just to the animated
That's
series?
a great question. We know that there will be...
I love when you say that. My question, by the way. Keep on doing it, okay?
That is a wonderful, amazing, great
even if
question.
they're not, just please help me out. Thank you.
Well, the thing about selecting a show, one that has ended, for a podcast is that that the podcast will end, essentially. And everything that we've created around the Arkham Sessions is really focused on the animated series. Occasionally, we will do like a special episode where we'll analyze a film. So we've done the animated film Assault on Arkham. For Christmas, we did a special episode on Batman Returns, which of course is a live action film. So we will deviate on rare occasion, but the focus is on the animated series. I would there's this hope that after we're done, we will move on. Actually, Bane is our next episode. So when you said that, I was so excited. We're going to cover Bane very soon.
Yes.
But we'd like to keep the show going. And we've asked our listeners, what would you like us to analyze and talk about? Would we move on to another animated show that folks are really interested in? Would we move to films? Would we just do sort of what's current day or modern? Suicide Squad will come out and we'll talk about that. So there are lots of options, and that's why your question is a great question, because I think that I can't fully answer the direction that we'll go in, because there is so much that we're excited about. But certainly when I talk about the animated series, the reason it's so important to me is that it was my first exposure to Batman, and it was my gateway to comics. I didn't read comics. I was watching the animated series after school, and I believe I was 12 or 13. I was so fascinated with it that I started to visit comic book shops and buy Batman comics. And so it was a wonderful gateway to this larger, bigger world.
So the first comic you purchased was Batman on your own?
Yes. And most of the comics I purchased were, you mean on my own? Like
when you saved your money
yes.
to buy a comic, and it was based off of your love of the animated series, so you bought a Batman?
Yes. I will say that I had been reading like Archie Digest comics, but I didn't really like that. Those weren't comics to me. Those were, I realize now those are obviously comics, but I didn't realize there's this whole world of superhero comics. And so the animated series really opened that world to me. And that's where my obsession really was honed in on Batman.
Wow.
Nice.
Got it. So, Londyn, you've got a plan for us today, don't you?
I do, because there's so much we could talk about with this topic, but
I want to get into your love for Star Wars for a sec, because I see that you are a fan of that as well as Batman. Is that right, Drea?
Well, I'm going to show you something.
Oh, I've seen that.
Oh, you've seen this?
Well,
I haven't. That's awesome.
I joined the Empire 5 years ago.
and can we tell the audience what we just saw?
No, they don't know what we saw.
Are you allowed to say?
Yes,
Okay.
I just showed everybody in this room an Imperial tattoo on my shoulder.
Right. And it is awesome,
Thank
That
you.
is pretty awesome.
but it's Imperial. It's the bad guys. What is up with that? I mean, I don't mind, the bad guys. Darth Maul is probably my favorite visual character in the Star Wars universe because that red and black face is just amazing to me. But why? What attracts you or attracted you or brought you to the dark side, young Padawan?
I know this. Now we're going there, right?
Can we?
I will
Is
say
it okay?
this.
like
Yeah,
this?
that's
okay.
fine.
And I think Londyn will understand this. This in the same way that we love the Joker.
Mhm.
I love Star Wars villains. They're complex, they're fascinating, they're intriguing. We don't want to be like them. They're telling us through the medium of sci-fi or comics or animated series, they're telling us that this is how society goes bad, right?
Right.
Morally, socially, ethically, all these reasons why we should not want to be like these figures or characters, and yet we glorify them and we idolize them, and there is that connection to them. So I think if my psychologist brain right now is saying it is a safe way, it's a healthy way for us to be close to things that are subversive.
Yes. Well, I've got your new podcast, by the way, after Arkham Sessions, The Coruscant Couch.
Oh, I like that.
You can have it. I mean, there's a lot of villains to explore, I'm sure.
Yes, there
All right.
are.
Was that a great title? Because my questions have been great. Was that a great
That
title?
was a great title. Well, I paused because I think this week I'm allowed to say that I'm going to start a podcast with my wonderful friend and co-host Amy Ratcliffe called Lattes with Leia.
Oh,
And it
It's
will
a
be
Star Wars
yes,
podcast.
yes. So it will be
Nice.
a Star Wars podcast.
by the way, I had no idea. I just
Really?
Yeah.
Because now I really like your title, but we've done all the press release. Everything's up for.
Okay.
So we can't change it. But
All right.
You were that close.
You know, it
though.
could be a segment.
it could be a segment.
The Coruscant Couch.
Yes.
There you go. All right. That's what I do here. Just come up with stuff. All right. Star Wars. And then the movie. You down? Force Awakens? How
Oh.
you feeling?
Yeah.
I loved it. I
Did
don't
you wait
care.
in line?
Did I wait in line? Did
Because
I
you're
wait in
also
line?
you're a cosplayer too. Is that what I've heard? It's a strobe light effect. You've got lights flickering.
I might have a seizure. I am a cosplayer. I do dress up in costumes. And actually, the very first costume that I wore, like a fandom-related costume that at the time I did not know was cosplay, was my own Jedi character.
Was that in the 1997 release of the
It was-
re-release of the movie? I've done some
I
research.
feel like you have my, I don't know, my biography. And I didn't know that I shared this with anybody, but yes, that is how I entered into the world of like costume wearing and cosplay. But at the time, I did not know about cosplay. I just thought, I'm so aligned with this franchise that I want to be a part of it. I'm going to dress up as my own Jedi character. Who thought?
Awesome.
Have you cosplayed as any Batman characters before?
I have.
Who?
I have dressed up as a couple of characters. I did like I did a Lady Riddler character,
Nice.
which I'll show you the photo of. And then I've done Huntress 2 or 3 times. I did like
Wow.
a steampunk
Nice.
version of Huntress.
Oh, I bet that was
And
awesome.
2 weeks ago, I did more of a classic version of Huntress.
We have to
Cool.
see these pictures.
I know.
I will send them to
But
you.
that's awesome.
And so the movie you loved,
Yes.
and you're excited for where the direction of the franchise is going. Is that an accurate statement?
I feel like I'm on the stand
I
and
just
that
want
my
you-
words could be used against me. I was very, very happy with The Force Awakens. I felt that it really was able to capture the feelings, all the feelings of the original trilogy, and introduce new characters and just tell a really great story. I think the story was very familiar.
Oh, yeah.
Very familiar. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that part of it.
Yeah, well, hey, my kids loved it, and I think that was what the audience or what Disney hoped to do, was to capture the imaginations of a new generation of fans to experience the same kind of or similar energy in the theater, and then basically hook them for life. So, kudos. Londyn, sorry to
Yes.
sidetrack, but
No,
I
it's
sometimes
fine.
get
This
so
is all great.
interested. Wow.
That's my screen saver.
We're looking at screensavers here. If you guys knew what we were looking at, you would see Andrea is legit. All right. So, Londyn, Batman. Let's talk Batman.
Okay.
What are we doing here?
Well, we're going to look at 5 different relationships that Batman has with different characters in his mythos, and we're going to dive into kind of the driving forces between how they act with one another, and we'll talk about certain stories that you can read, or whether it's TV or film, and you can see, and kind of dive into the mind of Batman and his world. So I think kind of to start it, we should just talk about Batman himself and look at the character Bruce Wayne. And you talk about the animated series, and of all of the different characters, I know Batman is perhaps your favorite superhero, maybe, but was he one that, compared to other characters like Superman or Flash or Wonder Woman, that you can kind of go deep into his mind and kind of see why he dresses up like a giant bat and goes out and fights crime? Because usually there's some type of tragedy with all heroes, whether it's a small scale or a large one, like witnessing his parents' death at a very young age. And that triggered him to swear that he would avenge his parents' death. But now, being Bruce Wayne and being the billionaire philanthropist, he has all of these resources, and he could do many wonders with Wayne Enterprises and all of his philanthropy, but he decides to become Batman. Where do you think that...
why didn't he just start an orphanage or
right, exactly.
some kind of mental health agency?
Yes, because I know
Institute.
we all know, okay, this is comic books. He's supposed to be a superhero. He wears the cape and the cowl and everything, but you don't really stop to think, well, why isn't he using all of the other resources? Instead of making grappling guns and batarangs and using all of his resources for that, why did he decide to dress up? Do you think there's something behind that isn't really, I don't know, kind of...
That was more than a bat experience, right?
Right.
I mean, why is that?
That
Yeah.
might go beyond just the comic book of, well, he needs to be a superhero and dresses up.
Right. I think that's part of the intrigue of Batman as a character, that there's something that hasn't been resolved with him,
Mhm.
that he's not integrated his good side, his bad side, his loss. You could say he hasn't reconciled his trauma. You know, you could say, and I think there are multiple ways to kind of perceive him as a superhero. And my favorite way to explore this is to look at his 3 personas: Batman, the vigilante who goes out at night and kicks butt and dresses up and has his tool belt and is absolutely freed and absolutely on a mission, right? He's very determined. He's very resilient. Then you have Bruce Wayne, that's the social persona, right? The billionaire, the playboy, the guy who has to be a little bit standoffish and detached. He's a certain way with women, and he has this reputation that's not exactly great, depending on what you're reading. Sometimes can we swear on this show? Sometimes he's an a-hole.
Yeah, there you go.
That's
Can
fine.
I say?
That's fine.
And then there's Bruce. And I say that I'm not saying at all that he has multiple personality disorder or anything like that. I'm saying that he has these personas, or he has these identities that haven't been fully integrated into one personhood. So Bruce, I would say, is the closest you can get to his personhood. Bruce is the guy Alfred knows. Bruce is the guy Dick Grayson knows. He's the guy who is emotional and vulnerable and has desires and wishes, and would probably acknowledge that he hasn't resolved his trauma, and he has a lot of guilt, and he is, I think, the most fascinating of the personas, but insists on having these separate, fragmented identities: the masked superhero, the social billionaire, brilliant playboy, and that kind of keeps him from really addressing his past, his history.
How would he address if he didn't have that? I mean, what would he do? What do you envision would be options for him to address the past?
Well, part of your question has the assumption that what he's doing is maladaptive. And so I don't know. That's the other thing, that I don't have definitive answers. Is what he's doing as Batman unhealthy for him psychologically? And some people even ask me, like, well, is Batman crazy? Mm-hmm. And usually my answer is, well, you have to define crazy first. Like, we can't have that conversation until we define
I was going to say, I don't think
Right.
that's a very scientific word.
Another great comment. Exactly.
You're just killing it today, Adam.
What do you know?
But there are some instances where I'd say, well, sometimes Batman is a healthy outlet. Sometimes you could say it's his way to be pro-social, and in my world, we would call it post-traumatic growth, that he's found a way to recover. He's found a way to recover from his trauma by taking all of those anxieties and insecurities and fears and directing that towards something that helps others. Did I not really answer your question?
No, you got there. I was just thinking of other great questions. So I don't know if you have one you want to follow up with, Londyn.
No, that's great actually. And I don't know, I've always thought about Batman, like you said, is what him as Batman and what he does as a vigilante, is that good? Because even though he is fighting for justice and fighting the criminals and the bad guys, in a sense, he kind of he teeters on the edge of being good and bad. And I think he even realizes that in stories. But do you think that in a general sense, because other characters, like in the Justice League, they'll say that or see Batman as kind of a bad guy himself. Do you think it's more that for him, he sees it as good, but to the masses, maybe Batman as a vigilante is bad for Gotham or for wherever he's fighting? Do you think that would be something that maybe Batman, what he does is bad, but I guess in his own mind, him being a vigilante in the way that he goes out to the night, for him, that is for him kind of in a healthy way to get out all that aggression and everything inside him that he can't, as like you said, as Bruce Wayne or even Bruce.
Right. And I think you're getting at something that I've talked about on the Arkham Sessions, that there's a part of him that kind of wants to be bad.
Yes.
And I don't mean that, like, and I truly mean, like, there's a part of him that has figured out that if he can be a superhero or if he can be Batman, I have some trouble calling Batman a superhero.
Yes.
If you call him a hero, if he engages as Batman and follows the mission and follows the standards that he's sort of self-imposed around that persona, then he has the excuse to engage in a number of antisocial, dangerous, high-risk type things.
Right.
And we'll talk about this when we talk about some of the characters we're talking about on the show. But what I mean by that is in the same way that we feel a rush when we join the military, when we become cops, when we engage in dangerous even if it's just high-risk behavior or dangerous behavior, when we do those types of things, and sometimes we do those types of things and we help others, but when we do those types of things, we get close to what could be, what I would say is like sensation-seeking, high-risk, potentially even endorphins, like that rush, that feeling of thrill. And there's something about Bruce that needs that. And there's some people, personality-wise, I'm not one of those people, but there's some people that seek those experiences. And I want to be very careful to say, like, those aren't bad things. That's not a bad trait to have. But we will talk about how that in excess can get us into trouble. And there are certain villains who have too much of that trait and then do get into trouble. And I think that, to go back to Batman, he likes to be very close to that. And so others might interpret that as him being slightly immoral or breaking laws or even being an anti-hero. And I can't really argue against that.
Okay. Yeah.
I haven't figured out how to make this question so great, but I think I am going to touch on something that I need help with, and maybe you can help me ask even a better question. So Batman maintains this line of violence where he will basically beat the snot out of you, but yet not kill you. He doesn't kill the Joker, but every time he's about to, he decides not to. Most people think, just get it done. Get it over with. It solves a lot of the problems. He's not coming back after that. Do you think it's important that Batman maintains that separation of violence to the point of no death? I don't know if that made sense, but do you understand what I'm saying?
That his rule of
It's
not
the same
killing.
thing with Spider-Man, right?
Yeah, he doesn't kill.
They don't kill. But they're doing basically everything up to that point. And is it an artificial line? Do you think if that he does cross the line and does kill, it is a slippery slope? Or do you think he could make an exception? Do you think that affects his psyche in any way if he does go cross that line? Do you think it's important that he maintains that line for him to keep his sanity or control?
Yes.
Okay.
No, I think that it's so important for him to not kill, and he tends to have black and white thinking, or black or white thinking, depending on how you want to look at it, all or nothing thinking, those types of extreme cognitive constructs. So he wouldn't kill even the worst villain that exists, one who could potentially harm and kill other people in the future, right? Like, one could argue that Batman could prevent other deaths simply by killing the Joker. But it's something that he won't do. He won't cross that line. Yet, if we even just take the animated series, he tortures a lot of people. He basically rams the Batmobile all over town. But I've even, when we revisit these episodes, we'll just see how much destruction there is. He could, by accident, just run people over the way that he drives. And he doesn't seem to care about that level of recklessness. He doesn't seem to care about his lack of control in terms of violence. but it's a very hard line. He just won't cross it. And I think that it's important for the character, obviously with all the representations and versions, this is something that has been, I don't know, Londyn, if you want to speak to that, but that seems to be a pretty consistent feature.
Right. No, definitely. And so Batman and Joker can be our first thing. Adam kind of jumped right into it. That's fine, too, because that's what we're going to talk about.
Well, I know
anyway.
we have talked about that.
Yeah, we have.
Batman
We've talked about
in the
this
early
before.
part of his career,
right?
1939, did kill.
Right. In his first year by himself, before Dick Grayson was introduced, he used a gun and he killed, and he was that Pulp Fiction dark character that Bob Kane Bill Finger created. And I know that kind of became less and less once Robin was in the picture, and he was there to bring a younger audience into comics and lighten Batman. He's kind of that levels Batman's dark side. He kind of gives that balance to him, almost the Batman and Robin dynamic. So kind of almost just looking at that, that's where Batman and Dick Grayson relationship come in. And of course, Dick Grayson was Robin for 4 decades until the 80s, where, and I guess we can kind of talk about that Dick Grayson, he wanted to have his own persona, because he felt that even though as Robin, even though he grew up and he graduated high school and he went to college, that him as a crime fighter, he felt under Batman's shadow. He wasn't his own, I guess, hero, and that's where he led to joining the Teen Titans, and he became Nightwing. And then just moving forward, him being the persona Nightwing, and then going into the 90s with Batman Nightfall, and after Bane broke Bruce Wayne, Batman's back for a short period of time in Prodigal, Dick Grayson took up the Batman costume. And there's a lot, and any time you see it in comics, there's in Prodigal, and even in 2009 when after Final Crisis, Dick Grayson becomes Batman in the Batman and Robin series with Damian Wayne, Bruce Wayne's son, as Robin. He struggles with being Batman because there's a lot of different comics that show that he doesn't want to become Batman or become the man that Bruce Wayne is, because I always felt that Dick Grayson was more optimistic about his crime fighting and being a quote-unquote vigilante, even though he kind of grew from the same ashes that Bruce Wayne did. He witnessed the death of his parents, and that's when he was trained by Bruce. And I think that Dick Grayson's an interesting character just because he wants his own persona, and yet he's put into these situations where he has to be Batman, the one person that almost casts this shadow over him and kind of dominates him being the hero that he wants to be. And with that, and then him, I always see Dick Grayson as a very humble character, and even though he thinks Batman is more, he can cast a shadow, he looks up to him, and I always see them as a kind of father-son dynamic.
For sure.
And so I was just wondering what you thought about just how Dick Grayson takes on his personas as a hero and kind of tries to step away from being kind of a darker character as Batman, because he fights crime and he fights the bad guys, but it's never as violent or as really difficult or dark as Batman does it.
Yes, and I think that part of that is because Batman has imposed that perspective, onto Dick Grayson in a way. Like, there are many conversations they'll have. I'm thinking about just the animated series as well as some of the comics where thinking of All-Star Batman and Robin, where it's just a crazy line where Bruce Wayne tells Alfred, like, Dick Grayson should be eating rats or something because that's what he did.
Right.
And we're like, no, you didn't. You totally did not eat rats in the basement by yourself in the dark. Don't say that. But I think it's so funny. It's kind of part of his perspective that he had it hard. And
right.
And
I went to school with bare feet, walking uphill
in the
both
snow.
ways.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. he wants Dick Grayson to have the same hardships, getting to being able to wear that the cape and cowl and taking on that mantle. I think he wants Dick Grayson to have that hardship, but at the same time, he doesn't believe that anybody could do it like he does.
Right.
And part of that is that he is in pain. I mean, truly, I think that part of it is that he doesn't believe anyone has experienced the same pain that he's experienced. And so, and to be clear, I don't think he wants Dick Grayson to have that same pain. I mean, he took him under his wing. Right. Because he wanted to care for him and he wanted him to have a better future than he had. And so there's that interesting dynamic.
Right. I think, by the way, I brought this up on other podcasts, that I just think it's kind of weird that Batman or Bruce Wayne keeps on bringing in these kids, and they're young, and the child endangerment issues are right there that no one talks about. I mean, that's the real problem.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I would totally call Child Protective Services on this guy. He does put them in danger, and he questions it. I think he's aware, especially when he takes on a new Robin. He has those thoughts. Am I giving this kid a better life, or am I actually shortening his life?
Yes.
And those are realistic thoughts. I think that part of him wants to offer Robin, whichever version of Robin, he wants to offer him something fulfilling and something meaningful. And it's because he hasn't reconciled what happened to him. What he's doing is fulfilling and meaningful, but not completely. And so he's has these redos with these children. And I think it works for some. I actually think that Dick Grayson came out the other side really healthy. Mm-hmm. And I think you mentioned a lot of reasons why that's the case. There's this rejection of having to be exactly like Bruce Wayne. And then there are cases like Jason Todd where it didn't work out so well.
Yes. And that's another relationship that I wanted to touch upon, because Jason Todd became the second Robin. I know a lot of people know him as Red Hood and just jumped to that, but he was the second Robin after Dick Grayson was Nightwing, and he was, at least after the post-crisis, because when he was first debuted, he was almost a carbon copy of Dick Grayson in the comics, but then they made him this reckless orphan that Bruce eventually takes in and trains him to become the second Robin. But in that sense, he was very different from Grayson. He wasn't that humble kid. He had his own mind and was really reckless, and it was a pain in Bruce's side a lot of times. But then in 1989, when the Joker killed Jason Todd in A Death in the Family, that really took a toll on Batman, Bruce. And even though in that same time in comics, The Killing Joke came out, and then Joker shoots Barbara Gordon and she's Batgirl, and all of that happened. But just with Jason alone, he always carried that guilt, and he carried that up until we see Jason again in Batman Hush in 2002. So it was over a decade where Batman will still be referenced, Death in the Family, Joker beating him with a crowbar, then the warehouse explodes, and all of that. He takes on that guilt that he didn't save him, that he didn't rescue him in time, that it's his fault. And even in part 4 of Death in the Family, there's this great panel where they're inside the courthouse and Bruce Wayne is there, and he's Bruce Wayne in his civilian wear, and then he sees Joker and they look at each other, and he just says that he just has this feeling that this will always continue, this will always go on. And I think for him, seeing the person that killed his almost adoptive child, and he carries that guilt and he feels that he didn't save him, that's another thing of, well, he should go and kill the Joker. That's just something that kind of comes up, I think, in that comic, because after Jason's dead, you would think that after that, and then after everything else he does, when The Killing Joke and to Gordon and to Barbara, that he would try to cross that line and kill him, but he doesn't. But Jason Todd definitely brings out the kind of guilt that Batman has, and I think he carries that same guilt for some reason with his parents. It's kind of referenced that even the death of his parents he feels that he's responsible for, and he kind of carries that burden that, okay, well, the only way I can avenge them is to go out into the night. So I think Jason's death amplifies that. And then once he returns and he's resurrected, and then he comes back in Judd Winnick's Under the Red Hood in that arc, and he becomes the Red Hood, which is influenced off of Joker's first costume, which I think in itself is, just going off of that, do you kind of see that as something that, Jason Todd is wearing the costume of his killer in a way. He's wearing the first costume of him. Where does that
Look
kind
at you,
of...
Dr. London.
Well, I've always thought about that because it's kind of twisted in a way.
It is.
He's wearing the costume of someone that murdered him. So where does that come from? Do you think? Is that something?
Yeah, I think you could look at it in many ways, but I sort of see it as I'm going to take control over my history. I'm going to take control over my trauma, and I'm going to... in many ways, Batman did the same thing. I'm going to take the image that frightens me. I'm going to take the image that put me in a vulnerable place, and I'm going to kind of take ownership over that and utilize that for my advantage. And so I think that what Jason Todd did made a lot of sense.
Right.
I got one.
Bring it.
I want your expert opinion on something. So you mentioned that it's good that Batman has the line that he doesn't kill.
Well, would you agree that it's good that somebody doesn't kill?
I agree. But do you think there's more psychological damage that would be created by killing Joker versus all the stuff that Joker ended up doing because Batman did not kill him?
So to answer that, I really have to go... I really have to talk about the Joker.
Do
okay,
it.
we can.
Yes, can I?
Get there.
Fine.
Can I go there?
Yeah, let's
You
just
go
go
there.
there. Let's go.
Are we ready?
Yes.
Uh-oh, it's getting dark.
Do we want to turn that one light off again?
Yeah. Mason, hook it up. No, okay. There you go. I like that.
Okay. And I don't think my perspective is unpopular or uncommon. I think that beyond the need to have the story continue, obviously in the comics, we need Joker to be alive. But I think that the Batman needs Joker to stay alive for multiple reasons. One, of course, is that if he kills the Joker, he just becomes the thing he hates.
Yes.
And he crosses the line. And I think that his mental health is in question. I think he really engages in a lot of subversive acts. One would say that he engages in a lot of transgressions. He breaks the law, all these things. But I think for him, if he kills somebody deliberately, violently, intentionally, passionately, that he would become insane, his version of what insanity is.
Mm-hmm.
And then my second comment about this is probably less popular, which is that I think that Batman wants a closeness with the Joker, that if he were to kill him, or if he were to help Arkham Asylum get better, a better lockdown system because he keeps getting out. If the Joker weren't in his life, there would be some issues. I think that the Joker is his way of getting close to subversion, getting close to danger, getting close to being antisocial himself. Like there's some participation in being violent, in being a villain, in engaging in immorality. Mm-hmm. There's a closeness that Batman needs, and he gets it because he gets to punch the Joker in the face. He gets to hear the vile things the Joker says. He gets to have the Joker stab him, or at least try to stab him with knives, and like all these dangerous, thrilling things
like
that the
that
Joker
rush
brings.
You were talking about before.
Exactly. So the Joker brings that into his life time and time again,
mm-hmm.
and Batman thrives on that. but he doesn't want to become what the Joker is. He just wants to be close to it. It is an outlet for him, and it fulfills something pretty dangerous in him. And I want to be careful not to say that, well, that means that he's, he has antisocial personality disorder. Or it doesn't mean that he himself is a criminal.
Mm-hmm.
It simply means that there's a part of him that wants to participate in that. And that's what the Joker does for him.
No, I completely agree on both of those points. And it's interesting to see that Batman, like you said, it's almost like he has a need for Joker. And even though Joker has hurt his family in many ways and even hurt Batman himself, I think that he needs that. But it's odd to kind of see on the flip side, seeing how Joker responds to having Batman in his life, because there are different stories you can look at that kind of observes this. Like, one of my favorites is in Legends of the Dark Knight. It's called Going Sane, and it's a 5-issue arc, and it's about when Joker believes that Batman is dead, and he says, well, if Batman's dead, then there's no reason for me to become the Joker. And he gets a job, and he fixes his skin, and he has a normal life. He gets a girlfriend and everything, and he stops being the Joker. And then in the end, when he finds out that Batman survived the explosion of the place, he snaps and he turns back and becomes a Joker again, and they start fighting all over again. And it's stories like that, or even, and then you look at stories like Superman, the Emperor Joker, when he gets all of the powers of Mxyzptlk, or however you pronounce
Mr.
it.
Mxyzptlk?
Yeah, I think.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that the guy who's you got to say his name backwards?
Yes.
Mxyzptlk.
Is that how you pronounce it? Yes,
Yeah,
Mxyzptlk.
see,
Okay.
I watched my Super Friends.
But Joker gains all, if not almost all, of his powers, and in the book, he every day kills Batman a different way, and he tortures him, and Batman goes through almost 100 different deaths, and it mentally scars him until Joker loses his powers, and Superman has to actually take all of the memories of Batman being tortured for him to survive, because they were so scarring and so damaging after, even though Joker stopped, that Superman thought he would never be the same Bruce Wayne Batman again. And that's actually something that Superman did that Batman didn't have any knowledge of. But then the normal story is that Joker fights him and he doesn't want to kill him, or there are things that say that he needs him to be able to do his own chaotic things. And it's odd that Batman is like almost the antithesis of Joker, and they almost have this yin and yang kind of relationship. But sometimes you see Joker as he, for some reason, wants to cross that line. Maybe he wants Batman to cross that line as well. And I think that's something. And he thinks that if he can push Batman to a limit, that he wants Batman to kill him, because he'll know that he won, I think. If Batman crosses that line and kills Joker, Joker knows that he, in the end, won, because Batman did something that he claims that he would never do, and he would make them that violent, almost criminal like everyone else.
Would Joker know that? Because Joker would be dead. And that brings up another question about the afterlife.
And
but I get what you're saying. Like, he knows it in the process of dying, which, I mean, this is such a morose topic, but which is why we turn the lights down. But I agree on that point, that there is that, what does winning mean to the Joker?
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean living. I mean, it really is a twisted, and you'll know this from the very first time we saw the Joker. He was really fascinated with his own death. He accidentally stabs. I mean, it's a weird story. He stabs himself, and it's hilarious to him. Yeah. He's like cackling about it, and even comments like how funny it is that he almost killed himself. And I think that I don't know, the way that he sees his own death is intriguing and funny to him. Like, there's this sense that he has turned violence and death and evil just into something that is a big joke to him. And it's really frightening if you think about it. But I believe for him, winning doesn't mean that he lives. Winning means that he really gets to, that the Joker gets to participate in some real thrilling, even more thrilling stuff that that Batman offers. And I don't think anyone else can offer that. I think Batman is truly the only person who can offer that high level, thrilling experience that the Joker wants.
Right. Clearly, Joker is an extreme representation of a personality that I'm sure you've studied, right?
Yes.
On some level, whether it be in research or books.
Yes.
What does that person who may not be as extreme as Joker look like in the real world?
I think that some of the traits that we've been talking about are not too uncommon. Again, someone who's a risk taker, someone who's sensation seeking, will engage in obviously in criminal, violent acts, but not for that secondary gain. I mean, there's obviously people who will steal or who will commit crimes for that secondary gain, but the primary gain is the experience of thrill. It is truly neurobiological if you think about it. It's really about the participation in something subversive. It's that experience in the moment, and it's fleeting, which is why it can get worse and worse.
And so those people we would typically find in jail.
We should hope so.
Yeah. And what is there a person that maybe we know, like Charles Manson or some serial killer or something that is maybe close to
a real life Joker?
A real life Joker. The realest
Does
life
that
Joker.
exist? Or is Joker so extreme we can't even think of someone in the media or someone just in general that would kind of be on any type of level that Joker
Was there a
is?
case study about someone that was close to being as extreme as Joker?
Well, I think that this is another wonderful question.
Thank you.
So I want to say two things. One would be, you're spot on to say that anybody who would have these traits would typically have done something to get incarcerated because they're just that out of control. But the answer really is that no, I haven't really thought about a real life person who would be the closest thing to the Joker. And part of that is because I have the Joker. Like the sole reason why on our show we talk about fictional characters is that it allows us to talk about real serious, sometimes traumatic, sometimes painful things that we talk about, but we do it with characters that don't exist in real life to allow ourselves to get close to it, to allow ourselves to really feel more comfortable doing that. And for me to talk about some of these real experiences that I've had without revealing who I've worked with, which is to protect their confidentiality. And so part of that exercise is to really focus on fictional characters. But my co-host, Brian Ward, will occasionally choose a case that exists or existed in history. So for instance, if we talked about Killer Croc, for instance, he will bring up a case of Lobster Boy, I think was his case for that episode. This real kid who had like a physical deformity and then joined the circus and ended up becoming a criminal. So we will on occasion select a real case and kind of draw that to the traits and the personalities that we're talking about, but it's rarer to do that.
What about Two-Face? Is that more of a realistic, I mean, of course it's a fictional character, but the kind of split personality thing, can you relate that more to the real world?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And
I was going to say, when we covered Two-Face Part 1 and Part 2,
those are great shows,
yes.
by the way.
Oh my gosh, they're
like
the best. We really were able to deconstruct this character and to think about, I mean, to get back to that question about real life people, we really did talk about real life experiences of that character, and that what amazingly what the animated series did for us was to give us a likable guy from the beginning, right?
Right.
A
yes.
decent, very smart, attractive,
Yes. Very charming guy.
A dude who would probably be successful, and then something really bad happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so that allowed us to talk about how, first, how personal experiences and traumatic experiences can really shape a person,
Mm-hmm.
but also that for him, he was dealing with his angry side, his tendency to become really irritable and irrational.
Big bad heart.
Yes. Yes. So in that story, he was seeing, I think I giggled when I first saw this. He was seeing like a psychoanalyst or a psychodynamic psychoanalyst, someone who was like probably doing hypnosis or hypnotherapy, which I don't do, for the record.
Okay.
I don't do that. And what we learned is that he has this other side to him. And so we clarified on the show the difference between multiple personality disorder, which is no longer a term. It's now dissociative identity disorder. DID is what the clinical term now is for that condition. But we talked about that potentially being what's happening to him. But we also talked about a more realistic presentation, which is that he might have bipolar disorder.
Okay.
And so his outbursts and his inability to control himself and his mood swings, for instance, were getting in the way of his functioning. And that kind of opened the door to talking about episodes of mania, episodes of, mood episodes where somebody feels like they're not really themselves and other people notice that, and how that can really interfere with someone's normal functioning.
Right. And in a Batman annual in the early 90s, Andrew Henfer wrote it. It was an origin for Harvey Dent, and they gave him bipolar disorder, or they diagnosed him with that. And it said that him dealing with the trauma of his abusive father kind of triggered that and made it worse. And then once he was scarred with the acid, it all just came to the surface. So that actually would, at least they've touched upon that in comics. So I see why that would make sense even in the real world. So, but of course, Two-Face is still an exaggerated character, especially just how he looks. But that's all. It's almost just what he is on the inside, just literally on the surface, on the outside. But there are people that suffer from bipolar disorder and things like that now. So that's, I think, of course, Two-Face or Harvey Dent is more of a realistic character, of course, than Joker will ever be.
Yeah.
But bringing that type of character into the Batman mythos, and you always see Batman or Bruce Wayne, he always wants to help Harvey. He always thinks that he could have saved him somehow, or he was his friend before when he was Harvey Dent, when he was the charming guy and he was friends with Bruce Wayne. And then once he turned into Two-Face, it was almost like he couldn't go back. It wasn't even that his mind was split, because all of his actions all kind of revolved him taking the Two-Face action. Mm-hmm. You would think that, half of him, especially with the coin, when he always would flip the coin and one side is scarred and one isn't. But in the end, it really doesn't matter whether he has the coin or not, because I think he's just so traumatized that Two-Face kind of takes over everything. But he kind of calls himself Two-Face because of the way he looks, and maybe he wants to have that type of rationale that, if I flip the coin, this makes sense for me to do something bad. But then again, you're flipping the coin saying, I'm going to let this decide to do bad things when this is bad, so you shouldn't do it. So,
right.
Yeah. But so I would think Two-Face, would be a more realistic person that you may see walking down the street than, of course, Joker. But I think Batman deals with different villains in different ways, and those are two. Joker's the extreme, and I think Harvey Dent's more on the more calmer side. But so we've talked about heroes like Dick Grayson and then kind of going into Jason Todd and then going to the villains. But I think the one that's in the middle that I always see is Catwoman, because herself, she's an anti-hero, or at least seems like one, I would say. And we look at Catwoman, we can look at the romantic relationship, which we've talked about on the show before. We've talked about love interest, just the fact that in the end, Batman, can he really have a healthy, solid romantic relationship, or is he too damaged in a way to have that type of relationship with someone like that in a romantic way? What do you think? Do you think that that's possible, that even Catwoman, who's kind of a same type of personality and they kind of have that same dark figure about them, and just the way that, I mean, they are in their own vigilante ways, that would be someone that at least a lot of people say that Batman would be suited for if he had to be with someone, or he was with Talia, who in herself, she is and Mason loves Talia, by the way, that's his favorite. So but she's another example where those two characters are in their own way a good suit for Batman.
Wait, can I just ask which version of Talia?
Oh, in the animated
series.
Okay.
That's
the animated series.
So yeah.
Totally. You can hear me rant on a previous episode if you want. But I just want to say real quick, is it possible, with the certain someone, that he could have, the real relationship if they understand him, if they know everything about him already, and in fact mirror him in many ways?
We should have like a dating show where it's like the 3 or 4 ladies and then Bruce Wayne, and he asks all these questions. And what was that called? The dating show?
Dating game.
The dating game. But generally, yes, I am one of those people. I do think that he could find somebody. He could partner with somebody. Mm-hmm. I say somebody because I don't know whether that person is a costumed multi-identity person or male or female, or I just don't know what he needs truly.
Right.
But I would say that my guess is that it would be someone like Talia, could be someone like
Yes, you are my favorite guest. Thank you so much.
Could be someone like Catwoman, but I think that Catwoman carries some baggage with her that she needs to resolve. And so, I'm not at all saying that people can't get together if they have baggage or if they have things that they need to reconcile, but that there's something about, and we actually covered this on our show, Catwalk was a recent Catwoman episode. There's something that she shared with him about her need to engage in a criminal lifestyle. And for her, it was about being free. It was about being able to be Catwoman anytime she wanted. It was about being able to fulfill her desires and wishes. And the way that she did that was through her Catwoman persona. And he didn't really seem to connect to that, which is bizarre because that's what he does as Batman.
That's what he does, right.
So I think that there is hope for him, and I think that there could be somebody that would be a great match for him. But I think that right now, if we can kind of take a snapshot of who he is, he still has to understand what truly Bruce. Now, if we talk about Bruce has to understand who he is and what he needs as a person. Because oftentimes when he's pursuing Catwoman, or even when he's pursuing Talia, he's doing that as Batman.
Right.
And we all get really, really confused and in love when he's as Batman, but that's not his full identity. So I think that truly the person who he's partnered with has to understand all of his personas, and he has to help that person integrate them to fully know, is this the person I want to be with? So it's a two-way street.
No, that makes perfect
sense.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. So he needs someone that can take all of him instead of just the one side Batman or just the one side Bruce Wayne. And I don't know if we've really come across someone that fully does that, but like we said, Talia, Mason's
It's a new
like,
character
what?
to be written.
Yes, that could totally happen in the future, but I think the closest we've gotten to is Talia or a Selena Kyle Catwoman type character. So,
Mason, I don't know why you're so excited about Bruce Wayne and Batman hooking up with Talia. I thought you wanted her for yourself.
To clarify yet again that, I think they are a good couple. Unfortunately, Talia at this point is way too damaged for a mere mortal like myself. But they are great for each other, and she does understand both aspects of Bruce and Batman.
Okay. Well, I was just trying to hook you up, man.
Yeah.
That's all.
I appreciate it.
okay.
Yeah. So I do have do you think so Sopranos, it was awesome. Well, hold on. I'm getting somewhere. You gotta work with me here.
I'm sure he has a point.
I got a
he's
great
getting
point.
there.
One of the things that made Sopranos so great was that Tony would go see a therapist, and it was awesome. It was an insight into a gangster or a mobster that had never been done before. It was fascinating. Why do you think they haven't done that with superheroes yet? See, I was going somewhere.
You were. I kind of figured you were going that way. No,
I've not really
I
seen
got it.
Sopranos.
I got it.
You didn't?
I've never seen The Sopranos.
Oh man.
It's good.
So it's
No, it's
okay.
good.
So do you know what it
You
is?
recommend
Do you know?
it?
Yes, I'm familiar with the character, the psychologist who sees Tony Soprano.
Right.
I know a little bit about that, but I've never seen the show.
That's surprising. I just think it would be fascinating to get your opinion on that, because it takes a genre that is so common and in the minds of so many people, and then flips it by actually putting a human side on this character who at times you're in favor of, you're disgusted by, you're intrigued by, you're repulsed. I mean, there's so much there, and yet he sits on a couch or in a chair and basically has therapy. It's amazing. It's such a cool look into this character. As I sit here and we talk to you, I just can't believe that they haven't done that in comics. Why don't we see Spider-Man or Peter Parker have a confidential relationship with a psychologist, and part of the dialogue during the comic book be him working through some of his issues?
Well, for one, I would totally read these comics that you're talking about. I would say that part of the problem is that there is still there's a stigma around help seeking. There's misconceptions around therapy. And I think that for superheroes generally to be receiving some kind of mental health intervention would be to admit that there's something wrong with them. Now, of course, I don't agree with that. I think
But that's just a general view.
Yes.
And then
that people have.
And so then even then elaborate, because you did touch on something, because I'm sure people in the audience may have that same image or same stereotype.
Right.
Why do you think that is wrong? Why is that an uninformed thought?
Well, for one, we know that a lot of people have received help in many forms, whether it's medication or psychotherapy, behavioral therapy. There are many, many different types of interventions for folks that have any kind of mental health problem or mental health condition. And so I think that in our society, there's still, despite high rates of help seeking, despite high rates of psychotropic medication, in terms of intervention, there's still this idea, there's this negativity around it, that if a person were to be receiving that kind of psychiatric help, that they are admitting that something's wrong with them, or they're admitting that they're less than, or that they're admitting that they have a dysfunction. And part of the problem is the mental health field. Sometimes, we use words like illness, condition, psychiatric disorder, psychopathology. I mean, these are all things that I've studied for many years. And unfortunately, that kind of language can, a lot of times, will exacerbate the notions of abnormal and normal. But when you really look at it, 1 or 2 people out of 4 people have a mental health condition or could benefit from mental health intervention. So it's actually not that abnormal.
Right. I mean, it almost sounds like that anyone could really seek help. And I want to use a word that, or words or phrase that actually makes it sound okay. Do you know, is there, because I notice the way you talk, you say the word help. It's help seeking. Is there something, I mean, because that maybe it's just marketing, or I don't know if you know Frank Luntz, the word doctor, and he, instead of, I think it was inheritance, he started using it, or inheritance tax. I can't remember what it was, but he started calling it a death tax, so then people wouldn't want. I'm kind of lost in, but he basically changes the way you think about things by using different words. Have you thought about words or phrases other than help seeking that people would feel comfortable? Like, oh yeah, you know what? That wouldn't be bad.
Well, it's
like if you said a mental massage. I'd say, wow.
That sounds invasive, and I don't want that.
Okay, well, I like massages.
I don't do that, by the way.
Right,
That's not something that I do. It is a challenge because, on the one hand, we want to be open and inclusive and welcoming and offer help to people who would like some support. And yet, part of our jobs is to diagnose. Part of our jobs is to identify dysfunction. Part of our jobs involve identifying when mental health conditions can cause so much distress that, a person can't work, a person needs family to be involved, a person needs to have a drug be, taken away, or lethal weapons being taken away so they don't harm themselves. So I want to be very serious about it as well. I don't want to create words that soften it because, we're talking about, I want to use words that are frank and clear. And furthermore, there is a lot of stigma around mental health conditions that I don't want to create words that take away from, that will somehow eclipse the importance of those things. So, we don't want to create new words for autism, for instance, because we don't want to. We don't want to. We don't want to muddy up, or I'm trying to think of the right word right now. We don't want to create more confusion about a condition that really needs a lot more understanding, awareness, education, research. So we do want to use those labels. We do want to use those categories to help people who fall into those diagnoses get the right support, get the right help, and we just have to have a way to speak the same language and communicate about that. So you're actually picking up on something that in the field is a point of contention and controversy, and most people have the right intention, but at the same time, we don't create different words for cancer. We don't create different words for medical conditions that are neurobiological or physiological in nature. So we want to make sure that people are able to get the help that they need.
Right. Well, it almost sounds like if everyone theoretically can benefit from it, right? It is help. It's almost like an exercise. It helps you grow. It helps because you think on a daily, people go to yoga. They do these things to help their bodies on a daily basis maintain, be strong, and continue to be healthy. And that is, I think, the way that it should be thought about with regards to your profession and professions similar, which is it's to help maintain, to help grow, to help evolve, and to help, I guess just health. Mental health is not a negative word. It is, or not a negative phrase. It is actually a good thing, because if you think about it like physical health, well, it's not so bad.
Right.
So.
Right. I agree with that. And so what I've been doing more recently is trying to use the words mental health versus using words that are more pathological, that would kind of categorize when it's unnecessary, right? Like there are comics, for instance, that talk about mental health. Mm-hmm. There are comics, there are shows that talk about mental health. Jessica Jones, Daredevil, Suicide Squad looks like they're going to be talking about mental health, right?
Yes.
We don't necessarily have to say mental illness.
I wonder if it's the word mental. I think maybe mind. Like I remember as a kid, like healthy body, healthy mind. If I think about a healthy mind, I don't know. That's just my thought on it.
So mind health?
No,
Mindful
a healthy
health.
mind.
A healthy mind.
Yes, like I specialize in healthy minds, healthy bodies. I don't know. Anyway, I'm just trying to work it out with you guys, and we're in a little session here, and I'm just figuring it all out. But I do feel it's important. I think that anyone out there, that's listening, and that has any question about this, your field and similar mental health fields, I think should explore. And I think it's a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing.
Thank you. I just, the fact that you have a guest on your show that talks about mental health and talks about psychological science, and I really emphasize the science part of that. I really appreciate that you're interested in bringing me on board just to have this discussion. Right. So that's really inclusive and very open-minded, and I'm very happy to be here. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
No, thank you for coming on. It's always great to look at Batman in all different ways, and this is definitely a great way to look at the characters that we all love and look at them on a more deeper level, and they're not just people on pages and panels there. I mean, there's depth to them, and so no, this was great. Thank you so much for coming on.
And also, I do want to, that is clearly what this podcast is about, the history of the Batman, but I do think we're also dealing with real world people and problems and issues and concerns, and let's be honest, the comic book world, the geek culture world, it's sometimes very isolating, and it's now becoming the culture where it's cool. But that's taken a long time, and there's been a lot of growth in individuals that they've had to experience in order to get to where we are now, and we're still not there yet. I mean, I think, Drea, your whole existence before you came out as the Doctor of Batman, so I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but
I'll take it.
You had to come and work through some issues about, could you come out as a geek or a nerd or whatever you want to call it, because you were worried about whether your peers would look down on that. And I think that that's probably what a lot of people who are going through, who love comic books, who love video games, who love gaming and cards and whatever we're talking about. So I think it's okay for them to, the listeners, and for others like us to reach out and to get some healthy minds, mind exercise, mental exercise for mental health.
The brain massage.
Now that sounds good to me, but I can understand how freaky or goofy that is to others. And invasive, which was, I thought, a very good description. So I felt like maybe that wasn't the best term. So thank you for crushing that one immediately. Andrea, where can people reach out to you? I mean, can people ask you questions?
Yes. This is yet another great question. Here's what I'm saying. If you have similar questions, I don't know, I feel like there could be some more questions that people might have. The best way to interact with me is on Twitter. My handle is @ArkhamAsylumDoc. And my TED Talk is Capes, Cowls, and Courage, which is available on YouTube. You could just look that up, look up my name. And my website is underthemaskonline.com, which hosts our podcast, The Arkham Sessions.
And is there email available if people wanted to maybe have a private question for you?
Yes. So there's a contact page on my website, and people are more than welcome to use that to ask me a question privately.
Good. Give me, what's that website again?
Underthemaskonline.com.
Okay. As it's spelled, right? Pretty
Yes.
easy. Okay.
Yes.
Under the Mask.
Online.com.
There you go. Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you'll come back again, maybe for a Suicide Squad.
I would love that.
That would be great.
And if you ever need us to come help on your podcast and ask great questions, then let us know. Londyn, anything
Yes.
to report on before we break out?
Well, let's see. This is Wednesday. So last night, the new Suicide Squad trailer came out, and I loved it. I'm pretty optimistic about it. You got to see more of Jared Leto's Joker and Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn and the whole cast, and it was all to the tune of Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, which I love. I'm a huge Queen fan, so I'm excited about it. And Drea, you said you saw it briefly. What did you think?
I loved it.
Yeah.
I'm excited for it. I feel like there are going to be some great themes in there about what it means to be a hero, what it means to be a villain, what it means to be a misfit.
Right.
I just think there are all sorts of great topics that are going to come
I mean,
out
the
of that movie.
tagline is "Worst heroes ever." That's
Yeah.
great. I love that. So, yeah, that would be great. And I know we didn't touch upon it, and we're running out of time. But really quick, Harley Quinn and Joker. What is that? What would you label that as in a most?
I would need
Concise
I
manner.
would need 2 hours.
I know,
But I
know.
would say so, and I've talked about this. I can plug my show because we
Please
talked
do.
about relationships, especially Harley and the Joker, and how it's much more complex. Of course, there's domestic violence involved, but there's a complexity to it that I think deserves exploration, in that there's something that they both benefit from being in that relationship. And Harley is another example of a person who is thrill-seeking, who really enjoys the rush of violence, the rush of near-death experiences. And so it's important to remember that when you have two people like that, their relationship obviously is very volatile, but it's hard to separate them because how else can they fulfill that need? So it is very unhealthy for them, but at the same time, there's something that kind of they relate to each other in that way. And I appreciate that about them. I still think there's something positive to say about those two, but I tend to, on the show, I'm usually the one who's able to find something good in like the worst person. So
Sounds like Londyn.
That's what he always says about me.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank
Thank
you
you.
for staying a little extra. We've obviously got a ton more questions, and maybe we should make this a part 2 at some point where we all get back together and talk more Batman.
sure.
All right.
Awesome.
It's a deal.
Yes.
It's a deal.
Great.
All right. Well, listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. This has
Yes.
been the history of the Batman with Londyn. I'd like to also let you know we've got some other cool programming going on. We've got the Disney Click podcast, Meltcast 3.0. We've got Pod Sequentialism with Matt Kennedy. He is interviewing Gerard Way, and that will be coming out soon. So please keep a lookout for that. We've also got On Some Hip Hop Ish I'm not cussing, but it is the S word. And that is where we talk about hip-hop and the collision with nerd culture. So please check that out. You can go to meltcomics.com and get led that way. Also check out Audio Boom for all the shows that we have on the Meltdown Network. Thanks again for listening. Tune in next week. And Londyn?
Peace, love, and Batman.